RCR with Paul Brennan, Reality Check Radio.
We last talked to Alex Hills of Candles for Assange towards the end, I think in the last or second to last week of May. And back then, of course, we were talking about what is going to happen with Julian. And if I remember rightly, I was being slightly pessimistic. Anyway, that was then, this is now, and a lot has happened. And Alex Hills is back with us. Hi, Alex.
Hi there. Quite a wild week or two, hasn't it?
Oh, has it what? Like I just said, I was kind of in a pessimistic frame of mind regarding his future when we last talked. How are you feeling?
Absolutely relieved, like many of the grassroots activists around the world who are frankly exhausted and fatigued, and very little help came their way, even from, the main campaign players. But really, we were all pessimistic, to be honest. There was a sense that he might well win that appeal, and I think that was probably one of the reasons that we saw US scrambling there. But the worry was that it would just carry on into human rights courts in EU and Europe, and it was just going to keep him in this horrible situation, which just is unacceptable anyway. So, yeah, a lot of relief being expressed around the world, a lot of parties being had. And instead of listing all the protests and angry vigils and all those things, I'm now listing all the celebrations and trying to highlight the grassroots activists that I think are very, very much responsible for what's happened.
Okay, so grassroots activists, which proves that with a lot of voices, things can happen. Do you think it was the US or the Biden administration that reached an ultimate pressure point there and just kind of had to let it go some way, but save face as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what this shows is that their case was a sham. There are 17 charges, including hacking and all sorts of, espionage act issues, have been reduced down to a misdemeanor for time served. They really looked like they were scrambling because they knew that they were going to lose, and it was going to look very bad for Biden, who already looks terrible. So, I think that was a major reason. Also want to highlight that there was some fantastic actions going on in America, which were putting massive pressure on the US representatives. There was a woman called Hala Benson in Ohio who was sending out these beautiful artwork postcards that were ready written and sending boxes of them around the country to every state. And those were getting through to US representatives. And the word on the street is that they were feeling the pressure from these kind of actions, but also the weekly actions that were going on in Germany and Mexico and Boston and DC, London. I mean, they had about 4 weekly events going on every week for many years. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of all that public pressure. And we should be encouraged, even though there are some terrible implications here with the plea deal. We should be encouraged, I think.
Yeah, the plea deal. So the elephant in the room, it seems to me, is that he was just doing his job.
Yeah, normal daily process of any journalist should be to hold their governments to account. Absolutely, he was doing his job. But what I do understand with this plea deal, so just to recap, he's waived the right of appeal on his alleged misdemeanor. Which is reasonable, I suppose, because if every plea deal could be constantly circled back to, you can see a problem in anyone ever accepting a plea deal. He's waived his right to discovery, legal discovery, and FOIA requests from himself, but not necessarily from other people.
Yep.
He's had to indemnify the US from any challenge to the Espionage Act. Now, arguably, that is completely non-constitutional anyway and could be challenged in another case. So I don't think that's the be-all and end-all. WikiLeaks have been asked to basically destroy past US documents, not future ones. So this doesn't preclude Julian from carrying on his work if he chooses to do so, but you'd argue that he needs to heal and be with family and not even raise his head up at the moment, certainly until he's a little bit better. But and the positive note, it just shows, like I said, that they're scrambling. Their document shows the case was a sham. They admitted in the plea deal itself that no one was harmed by WikiLeaks publications, which we've known for a long time, but it's not been, probably very publicly known. And also Julian was able to express his concerns within the plea that there is a massive contradiction and conflict between, the public's right to know and the First Amendment rights that they should have, and this Espionage Act, which should never be used for journalism, as we know.
Okay, Alex, I want to play this clip, and this was recorded at the hearing or the plea in Saipan on the way. Northern Marianas Islands, dropped in a corporate jet just for this. So I want to play this and then we can talk about it.
At this time, I'm asking you to explain to me, what is it that you did that will constitute the crime charged?
Working as a journalist, I encouraged my source to provide information that was said to be classified in order to publish that information. I believe that the First Amendment protected that activity, but I accept that as written, it's a violation of the Espionage Act statute.
So you had certain belief, but you understand what the law actually says as well.
I believe the First Amendment and the Espionage Act are in contradiction with each other. But I accept that that it would be difficult to win such a case given all the circumstances.
Okay, so the Espionage Act, which is some archaic act from the early 1900s, I think, outshines the First Amendment.
Well, upon first inspection, you might think that, but I don't think many people are talking about this issue. He's just signed a plea deal to get out of prolonged torture. Now, I don't think there's any legal system that could argue that a person who's being subjected to prolonged, ongoing torture, which is illegal under the amount of solitary confinement that he's had is actually illegal under EU laws, under Article 10, under many, many laws. And so he's ended up, a victim of torture who has been forced to give a plea, which not only is illegal under First Amendment and, other First Amendment. I mean, keep in mind, that's the very First Amendment, so it shouldn't be overridden. And I'm sure someone could argue on that point. But additionally, he's a victim of torture, trying to get out of torture. And I don't think anyone can fault him for what he's done there. And I think that other journalists can pick up this battle. So, other journalists can, on his behalf, because of the threat to journalism, which isn't a legal precedent as such, because this is just a plea deal. It can't be used judicially in a court and cited. But on the other hand, you can't ignore the fact that many, many journalists will be horrified with what's happened to Julian, the persecution that we've seen, and even the charge that he has had to do a plea deal for. And it will have this huge chilling effect on journalism that we've been always worried about. But yeah, I don't even think that the plea deal that he's signed is legal on several bases. So bases, or how do I say that?
Bases will do.
Yeah. So I mean, that's my feeling. My feeling is that it's illegal, and this is a torture victim trying to get out of torture.
Yeah, I wasn't criticizing him in that. I was sort of making a general point, because we always hear how the First Amendment is sort of like written on tablets of stone, not the Espionage Act. But what they did is they showed the instruments of torture through him, didn't they, to anyone else who might want to have a go, or whatever, however you want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, some people that still criticize Julian and maybe believe that he's some sort of CIA or some sort of psyop to reduce journalism's effectiveness. I don't think that that's a valid argument. But yes, certainly there's a lot of contradictions here. And the Espionage Act is, it was intended for foreign, people that were giving secrets to foreign enemies. This is not the case. This is the public's right to know about genuine crimes, corruption, electoral fraud, pedophilia, all sorts of stuff that really, we have every right to know because we're paying taxes and huge amounts of money are being laundered through this constant war, which isn't meant to be a successful war. As Julian said, it's meant to be, an endless war because it's just so enriching for those in positions of power.
Yeah. The information that he can't publish that he had, that's an interesting point, I reckon, because there must be, if it's okay to publish stuff that you come upon from that point on, then what's the problem with information he already had? There's something.
Well, I think it's the unredacted information. If you think about it, he has got the raw data there somewhere. Although that's never been published in full. It's been, teams and teams of journalists worked, including our own Nikki Hager, worked to redact names, redact information that would be considered harmful, maybe items that weren't necessarily to be, were national security issues and shouldn't have been disclosed. We don't really know what Julian hasn't published and what he has, but what they're predicting is that any US leaks that haven't been published, they don't want to see those rearing their ugly head again. That's what I
especially before an election.
No.
With a candidate, and I'm thinking of Biden, who's up to his neck in it, possibly.
Absolutely.
And
yeah. Did you hear Penny Wong's comments though?
I was going to mention that. They're quite strident, aren't they?
Yeah, really. Again, completely not seeing the wider picture. Very, very happy that she welcomed him back and, was pleasant because we've not had a lot of joy from Penny Wong over the years with this campaign. But basically she said something along the lines of, we have laws in Oz relation to national security information. We expect those laws to be observed by all citizens and all entities. Now, that statement itself really smacks of covering up government crimes. And when there's a public right to know, that is absolutely against all methods of journalism. We know that is how injustices are at least aired and people can vote at least, or, you can say the election system is broken, but, at least people have a chance to know what is being done in their name. So given that Australia has had some major problems with whistleblowers, just like New Zealand has, you've got, David McBride currently in prison for revealing war crimes of Australian servicemen. You've got Richard Boyle, who's in jail for whistleblowing regarding tax fraud within, the government. You've got, other people, journalists, ABC journalists that were, illegally raided and all sorts of stuff in Australia. So, it really just shows you that they're pushing on with this anti-journalism front. And really that has to be, anyone who's still wanting to fight in this free press, because it's still very important that these precedents, or whatever you want to call them, chilling effects are combated over time. And maybe Julian won't be the one to do this, but certainly we can take up his fight. Journalists can. Normal members of the public who are interested for their own information purposes. There's no reason why other people can't pursue these issues.
Yeah, the second part of what Penny Wong said, and it's kind of like a throwaway line after the quote that you mentioned, and she says that is our position, yet obtaining and disclosing classified interest information is normal job of journalists revealing crimes of government and others. So she's having it both ways.
Yeah, she doesn't know whether she's coming or going, does she? Wow. Yeah, just very contradictory. All these things are incredibly contradictory. And to be honest, I have very little faith in the legal system. It just seems so broken. I've been looking at natural law and common law and other ways that you can stand yourself. I think as soon as you get lawyers involved, you can end up in these issues because the act of being a lawyer is in some sense fraudulent against the people, in my opinion. But that's just the area that I've been looking down of late. I think that we have a lot more chance if we stop giving our government all this authority. and our legal system that is clearly broken. It's like we need to build a new legal system, one by
Like
the
a whole
people.
lot of other new systems, health,
Yeah.
education.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to come and talk to you about the architecture and the building industry and how that's gone exactly the same way that it has for the doctors. You know, there's so many areas where there is massive injustice and hypocrisy and pseudoscience and, you know, the science, dogma science, rather than really the scientific method being employed. And yeah, there's so many fights that still need to be had. And really, they're all the fundamental one overarching all of them are, you know, that journalists can publish information that is inconvenient to go, you know, to the power structures.
Well, we've seen, Alex, what the cost of that in the last 3 years. It's been laid bare. And even now, we've got terrible conflicts happening and, forces ranging up against each other, which are incredibly powerful with nuclear weapons. And we're still sort of talking about, you know, the person who got, something trivial happened to them or, you know, what the latest celebrity's doing. And it just rolls on. And there's no reporting of these momentous conditions and events. So I think we can really securely say that has happened, and it hasn't just happened recently. It's been going for a while. The footage of him getting on the plane and getting off the plane, he looked in better shape than I thought he would be. I was really curious to see the video of that. But his wife, Stella, and I don't blame her, she looked basically exhausted and like, you know, really at the end of something that's just, you know, taken them to the edge. I'm wondering what you're hearing from, I don't know, the people who are sort of looking after him and caring for him, surrounding him in Australia, his family and friends. How's he doing? And I guess he has to heal because he's been through a hell of an experience, both physically and psychologically. So can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I don't know anything more than what's being, you know, talked about publicly. I think that they've whisked him away somewhere, probably Queensland, somewhere quiet and out of the way, and that he's been on the beach and pictured in the forest hugging Stella. And I understand that they're going to keep it really private, but that, you know, he has reunited with his boys, and it's been a sort of slow process because of the shock of it all happening all of a sudden. I mean, we've known about the plea deal potential for, you know, over a year now. But the reality of it happening is quite a shock to, you know, even people like me who know Julian's dad and, you know, have been communicating with them. They've obviously kept it undercover all this time because there's probably been quite a lot of negotiations. I can only imagine all the positive things that came out of that plea deal, including, you know, admitting that WikiLeaks have not published anything that harmed anyone. And
yeah, I was going to mention
allowed.
That. It turned out to be, well...
Yeah, well, we knew that again from the Pentagon's court cases with Chelsea Manning. They had to admit it back then. And I mean, Chelsea Manning had already served her sentence for the act of revealing classified documents. So it's so ironic that the journalist was still being persecuted so many more years. I mean, because it really has been, 14, 13 years that he has been in one kind of detention or another, most of the time kept in a single room, and for the last 5 years in high security in a terrible situation where he only got 1 hour out a day, and sometimes that was at nighttime, or I understand that was quite a lot of the time at nighttime, so he wasn't getting any vitamin D. Like the torture that has gone on is undescribable, and really we owe it to ourselves to, you know, to carry on with this case as much as we can, demand pardon, demand Espionage Act overhaul, you know, or complete abolishment. I think that is the answer, and we might not be able to expect Julian to fight that case because, you know, there is the threat that he will be persecuted. I mean, he could have come back to Australia in other circumstances and they could have still been chasing him if he hadn't signed the plea deal. It really was his only avenue of seeing his family again. And so, yeah, I think that we all have to take on that battle as hard and tired as we all are. I think it's very important that we do. Yeah.
I wonder who his source was. I keep thinking.
I mean, I would say almost 99% for the DNC.
Yeah.
death, of course, but, who's going to really, we haven't got proof. We haven't, we've got a lot of circumstantial evidence.
I think people know who I'm alluding to. He's no longer with us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's just one of the leaks. We've had other people that have ended up being persecuted too for the Vault 7 leaks. We've, all along the way, there has been issues. I mean, Julian did what he could to create a Dropbox that was completely secure, but you can't protect everyone from everything in this mass surveillance era. It's very hard. I mean, they can see who you are from your keystrokes and from the gait of your walk and all sorts of things. It's almost impossible to imagine that we've got any privacy, and therefore we need transparency. It's without a doubt.
Yeah,
I think we need to prosecute now the war criminals.
It's about time for that, isn't it?
Sorry,
it's about time for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a stage that everyone resents, that there really has not been any kind of justice for the people that have actually shown to be acting completely illegally, conducting war crimes. We've got none of that. I mean, I'm so excited to hopefully one day again hear Julian's words. I don't think that there's been anything to stop him from, as I said, continuing his work, receiving classified or other leaks. I don't think there's, just the overall chilling effect that is there. But yeah, hopefully if we've managed to keep up the fight on free press here and don't let it go now just because we think we're out of the woods, there's a lot of work to do. Yeah.
All right, Alex, great to catch up with you after this now, and feeling quite relieved actually, because anyone in the journalism business, if they held to their principles, and obviously it would require quite a serious position or reporting like, Julian was doing, could have this happen to them. Anyone.
Yeah. There is that risk.
It turns out.
Although it can't be cited as an actual judicial precedent because it is just a plea deal, all the risks remain, and clearly they could use the Espionage Act again to persecute someone.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of psyops that was going on around this case, though, that decimated his support for so many years, the fact that the journalists, the stenographers really that are in the mainstream media then did not battle for him, even though they were the ones that had published his works and are just as much likely to be, susceptible to the Espionage Act themselves for their publications. The fact that they didn't step up, it should just make people vote with their feet in terms of who they listen to for news. If someone covered this case accurately amongst all that psyop and psychological tools being used to discredit someone, then you know that they're a good journalist. So it's kind of like a litmus test, isn't it, to know who to go and listen to and take notice of in the journalism world.
Alex Hills, Candles for Assange. Thanks for coming back for a chat, Alex. And let's, as we always say, let's see what happens next.
Absolutely.
He's welcome in New Zealand, by the way. Come here for a holiday. I'd love.
His granny was a Kiwi, as you know. And,
that's right. I remember you saying.
Yeah. He's got a little bit of Kiwi in him. So, that would be lovely. I don't know if he's any safer here than Australia, to be honest, though.
Well, give him some isolated, good accommodation somewhere in the South Island, in the Southern Alps somewhere, and just he can chill out on his own with his family. And
yeah.
Yeah.
It would be lovely. It would be an honour to have him. All
right. Okay, well, let's see what happens next, and we might talk again. Thank you, Alex, and for everything you've done there, by the way.
Oh, pleasure, and thank you very much. It's been exhausting.
Right now, free speech is under heavy attack in New Zealand and overseas, with governments constantly devising new ways to enforce censorship. To make sure you never miss the critical news and breaking stories you rely on, join the RCR mailing list today. Get connected now at realitycheck.radio/email.